It was a Tuesday night in June 1966 at American Sound Studio in Memphis, and the clock on the wall showed 11:45 p.m. The recording session for that day had wrapped up hours earlier, the musicians had packed their instruments and gone home, the engineers had shut everything down, and by all accounts the building should have been completely empty. But it wasn't. Dorothy Hayes was there, doing what she did every night. Dorothy was 52 years old and had been working as the night janitor at this studio for 3 years. She had raised 5 children on her own after losing her husband 10 years earlier, and cleaning jobs had been what kept her family fed and housed through all of it. Her kids were grown now and doing well, but Dorothy kept working because she valued her independence and her own income, and honestly, she loved being in that building. Not because mopping floors was exciting, but because this was a place where real music was made every single day, and even at night, when everyone was gone, there was something special about being inside those walls. One of Dorothy's favorite parts about working the late shift was that once she was sure the building was empty, she would sing. During the day she stayed quiet and out of the way, not wanting to bother anyone or draw attention to herself. But at night, alone in those big empty rooms, she let her voice out completely. She sang gospel songs, the hymn she had grown up singing at Rising Sun Baptist Church, where she had been a choir member since she was 5 years old, which meant she had been singing in that choir for 47 years by this point. On this particular night, Dorothy was mopping the main studio floor, singing at full volume, her voice bouncing off the walls and filling the entire space. She was completely in her own world, not holding back even a little, just singing the way she would sing in church on Sunday morning. What Dorothy had absolutely no idea about was that Elvis Presley was still in the building. Elvis had stayed behind after everyone else left because he wanted some quiet time alone to sit and listen back to some recordings from earlier that week without anyone around to distract him. He had told everyone to head home and that he would lock up. He had been sitting by himself in a small listening room in the back of the building with his headphones on, going through the tracks carefully. At some point he took the headphones off to give his ears a rest, and that is when he heard it. A woman's voice, coming from somewhere else in the building, singing gospel music. And not just singing casually the way someone might hum while doing chores. This was real singing, powerful and full and completely controlled, with a depth of feeling that made Elvis stop everything he was doing. He stood up from his chair and walked to the doorway of the listening room. The voice was definitely coming from the main studio. He moved quietly down the hallway toward the sound, and as he got closer he could make out the words clearly. It was a gospel song he recognized from his own childhood, but this woman was delivering it with a weight and an emotion that gave him actual chills. This was not casual music. This was the kind of singing that came from decades of standing in front of a congregation, from genuine faith, from a voice that had been shaped not in any professional setting but in church, week after week, year after year. Elvis reached the doorway of the main studio and stopped. He could see a woman mopping the floor with her back to him, completely absorbed in both her work and her song. The mop was moving in time with the music, and she was singing like there was nobody else on earth. Elvis leaned against the door frame and just stayed there, listening. He did not say a word. He did not want to interrupt. He just let her voice fill the room around him. What he was hearing was not amateur singing. This woman understood how to use her voice as a real instrument. She knew how to move smoothly between powerful, full-chest moments and soft, quiet ones. She knew how to let the words of the song guide the way she delivered each line. She knew exactly when to hold a note out long and when to move forward. Elvis recognized all of this immediately because he understood singing, and what he was hearing from this woman was the product of serious experience. Church singers, he knew, could not rely on microphones and studio equipment to carry them. They had to fill a room with nothing but their voice and their conviction, and they had to connect with people on a real emotional level. This woman had clearly been doing exactly that for most of her life. She finished the first song and went straight into a second one. Slower and more thoughtful this time, her voice settling into a gentler but still commanding tone. Elvis felt the hair on his arms stand up. Then she moved into a third song, more upbeat, and her voice opened up even more, climbing higher, adding runs and little vocal touches that showed she truly knew what she was doing. Not the kind of flashy showing off meant to impress people, but the kind of skill that comes from truly understanding a song and knowing exactly what your voice can do to serve it. Elvis checked his watch at some point and realized 5 minutes had gone by, then 10, then 15, and he still had not moved from that doorway. After a full 20 minutes of standing there listening, he decided he could not just keep standing in the dark without saying something. It did not feel right to keep listening without letting her know he was there. He stepped into the studio and said quietly, "Excuse me." Dorothy spun around so fast the mop flew out of her hands and clattered onto the floor. She stood there staring at Elvis Presley with her hand pressed to her chest, absolutely stunned. She immediately started apologizing, telling him she had no idea anyone was still in the building, that she thought everyone had gone home, that she was so sorry for making noise. Elvis quickly told her to stop apologizing and explained that he was the one who owed her an apology for standing there listening without telling her he was there. He told her that he had been working in the back room and heard her singing and simply could not bring himself to walk away. Dorothy looked completely mortified and said she would stop singing right away. Elvis told her firmly that she absolutely should not stop, and that what he had just heard was genuinely beautiful. He asked her how long she had been singing like that. She told him she had been singing her whole life, mostly in church and around the house. He asked if she had ever had any formal vocal training or lessons. Dorothy laughed a little and explained that she was a janitor who had raised 5 children on a janitor's salary and that vocal lessons had simply never been something she could afford. But she told him she had been singing in the choir at Rising Sun Baptist Church since she was 5 years old, and that she had been doing it for 47 years. Elvis shook his head and told her that was exactly where someone learned to sing the way she sang. Dorothy said simply that church had taught her everything about singing, and that God had given her the voice and she just used it to worship and to keep herself company while she worked. Elvis asked her name, and she told him it was Dorothy Hayes. He told her directly that he had been in the music business for a long time, that he had heard a great many singers including professionals with record deals and radio airplay, and that what he had just heard her singing while mopping the studio floor was genuinely better than most of what ended up on the radio. Dorothy smiled and thanked him, but it was clear she thought he was just trying to be nice. Elvis told her he was not being nice, he was being truthful, and he asked her whether she had ever thought about recording music, about making an actual album. Dorothy laughed at that, not bitterly, but like the idea was so far outside her world that she could not quite take it seriously. She said she was 52 years old, a church lady and a janitor, and that people like her did not make records. Elvis asked her why not. The question clearly caught her off guard. She struggled to explain it, saying that recording artists were young and polished and that middle-aged cleaning women were not who record labels came looking for. Elvis asked her who said that had to be true. He told her that talent was talent and that age did not change it, and that what she had was real talent that deserved more than late nights in an empty studio. Dorothy's eyes filled up with tears. She started to say again that he was being kind, and Elvis interrupted her gently and told her to stop saying that, because he was being truthful, not kind. Then he asked her a straight question. If she could record an album of gospel songs, the songs she loved, the songs she had been singing her whole life in church, would she want to do that? Dorothy was quiet for a moment before answering. She said of course she would, that what singer wouldn't want to record their music, but that it was just a dream and not something realistic for someone in her situation. Elvis told her he might be able to make it realistic. Dorothy stared at him. He explained that this studio, these engineers, and these musicians all worked with him on a regular basis, and he asked her what she would say if he arranged for her to come in during the day and record a proper gospel album with full professional support. Dorothy told him immediately that she could not afford to pay for studio time. Elvis told her he was not asking her to pay for anything, he was offering to arrange it. Dorothy started crying. She asked him why he would do something like that for someone he had never met before. Elvis told her it was because he had been standing in that doorway for 20 minutes listening to her sing, and he knew talent when he heard it. He also told her that gospel music was deeply personal to him, that it was where he had started, that it had shaped who he was as an artist, and that when he heard someone singing it the way she did, with that much soul and faith and genuine feeling, he believed the world deserved a chance to hear it. Dorothy wiped her face with her work apron and said she did not know what to say. Elvis told her to say she would think about it. Then he pulled out a business card and wrote a name and number on the back of it. He told her the name was Chips Moman, a producer at the studio and a friend of his, and he told her to call Chips the next day and say Elvis had sent her, and to tell him that Elvis wanted him to set up some gospel recording sessions for her. He told her there was no pressure and no strings attached, just an open door to record the music she loved. Dorothy took the card with shaking hands and asked if this was really happening. Elvis told her it was. She said she wanted to do it, that she definitely wanted to do it, and her voice was steadier and stronger when she said it than it had been the whole conversation. Elvis told her to call Chips the next day, and before he left he told her one more thing. He told her not to stop singing while she worked, that she had a real gift and she should not hide it just because she assumed no one was listening, because you never knew who might be in the building. Dorothy laughed through her tears and said she certainly had not known he was there that night. Elvis said that was his fault for working late without letting anyone know, but that he was glad he had heard her, and that it had been the best thing that happened to him all day. Dorothy Hayes called Chips Moman the very next morning. The moment she mentioned Elvis's name, Chips told her that Elvis had already called him the night before and told him about her voice. He asked her when she could come in. 3 weeks later, Dorothy was standing inside American Sound Studio as a recording artist. There were professional musicians there for her, professional engineers running the equipment, and arrangements that had been written specifically to suit her voice. The songs she recorded were the ones she had been singing in church her whole life, now being captured properly for the very first time. Dorothy did not quit her janitorial job. She kept working her regular hours. But several times a week she came into the studio during the day as an artist, working through tracks, collaborating with musicians, and learning how the whole production process worked. The album came out 8 months later. It did not become a massive commercial hit and it did not make Dorothy a household name, but it found its audience steadily among gospel music fans who recognized and valued the kind of deep, authentic church singing Dorothy had spent a lifetime developing. She began performing at churches and gospel concerts, earning some income from her music and getting to share something she had always kept mostly to herself. But what the experience gave Dorothy went far beyond album sales or stage appearances. It gave her validation. It gave her recognition. It gave her the firm knowledge that her voice and her gift and her talent were not somehow less valuable because of her age or her job or the circumstances of her life. She had always been an artist. She just happened to be one who also mopped floors at night. In a 1982 interview, Dorothy looked back on that night in 1966 and talked about what it had meant to her. She said she had been mopping and singing and thinking she was completely alone in the building, with no idea that Elvis Presley was standing in the doorway taking in every word. She said that when she turned around and saw him, she genuinely thought she might die of embarrassment right there on the spot. But she said he did not treat her the way she expected. He did not look at her like a janitor who had been making noise while she worked. He looked at her like a singer, like someone whose voice mattered. He told her she had real talent, and then he opened a door for her that she had never once believed would be open to someone like her. She said she was 52 years old at the time, had raised 5 children, had spent 20 years cleaning buildings, and had fully accepted that this was simply what her life was going to be. But Elvis heard her singing that night and saw something beyond the uniform and the mop. He saw the artist who had always been there underneath it all, and he gave her the chance to share that with the world. She said it did not just change her music, it changed how she saw herself. It reminded her, she said, that talent does not